Let me say good morning once again to Congressman Jody Arrington calling in from Washington, D.C. Of course, session starts tonight. Congress back from the summer recess. Looks like it's going to be a contentious one. Democrats really trying to make hay out of gun control and Green New Deals and pretty much everything that we talk about here a lot on a daily basis. And so let's get into it with the Congressman. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Wade. I'm doing great, other than I'm not in West Texas with you. But we got a lot of work to do, mainly, I think, on the defensive side, defending our God-given liberties and making sure that we fend off big government socialist policies. I think one of the things on the agenda this week is no surprise the Democrats want to ban fracking.
Yeah,
and
I saw that. Wow.
They've already banned.
I laugh, but that is so sad. It's sick. But go ahead.
Well, after attempting to ban cows, now they're banning fracking, which means that their big target is on the backs of rural Americans and places like West Texas, where we're the ag and energy capital of the country. So I guess they don't realize or fully appreciate the what fracking has done for the consumer, what it's done for the economy, and because of this shale natural gas play, what it's done for the environment, because we've seen a precipitous decline in carbon emissions and other pollutants, greenhouse gases. Did an event recently on methane gas and a repeal of an EPA regulation, which was a midnight Obama duplicative regulation. And the oil and gas industry has actually brought methane gas emissions down 57% in Texas. And that's over the same period of time we doubled production. So I guess my point is, these folks on the other side of the aisle just never cease to amaze me with their backwards thinking on how to regulate an economy into the ground when we've gotten this economy growing like we haven't seen in over a decade. And it's helping every American have the dream of greater opportunities for their family, which is what America's always been about.
Congressman, when I first saw that, if I was smart enough to make a meme, I thought I'd make one of those and go, do you want a recession? Because that's how we get recessions. You know, exactly. On the oil and gas deal, I'm like, the consumer feels that at the pump. The people that are out working those jobs have wages well above what your average hourly worker are making. It makes us less reliant on people who hate our guts halfway around the world. To your point, Britt Hume actually tweeted out something. This was last week. U.S. CO2 emissions are down to where they were in 1985. CO2 emissions down to where they were in 1985, a third of a century ago, when the GDP was half of what it is now on an inflation-adjusted terms, and the population was smaller by a quarter. No other industrialized country has come anywhere close to this.
That's
Yet
right.
It's still not enough. It's still not good enough. We're still the dirty guys in the world, and I just scratch my head and I go, God, are you kidding me?
It's amazing that the left continues to propagate the notion that somehow we're not leading or doing enough on clean air and reducing pollutants. Since 1970, Mike, we had passed the Clean Air Act. By the way, that was driven by Republicans to identify 6 of the key pollutants that drive, the quality of air. Of the 6 key pollutants total, the cumulative effect is that we've reduced them over 70%. I think it's 73% to be exact. At the same time, between the 70s and today, we've grown our economy over 300%. There is not another country in the world that has done more for clean air and clean water and stewarding the environment. And at the same time, we've managed to create, the largest middle class. We've managed to create the greatest quality of life and standard of living. that is all because of a free enterprise system and reasonable but low and consistent, standards of clean air and water. But the deals like the Paris Climate Accord would just absolutely destroy our economy and give China and India and the real polluters a pass, as you know. The president, this is what I love about this president probably the most, okay, is that he is willing, or rather he is not willing to do window dressing political sham deals just so he can get a pat on the back and claim that he's got a legacy of preventing, for example, nuclear growth in nuclear arms in Iran, or saving the planet by the Paris Climate Accord, or doing a deal with China that wouldn't be a truly balanced reciprocal trade deal. So I trust this president when he's doing deals. I don't always agree with his approach, but he's unconventional, and what the heck, I just know that he's not going to agree to something that's not in the best interest of our country.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So you think the two takeaways will be, okay, one is to stop fracking, to attack the energy, the great booming economy that we're seeing, because I guess to try, all of this, by the way, is to try to score cheap political points during an election year. I mean, there's no doubt about that. They're not really serious. They're serious, but they're deranged. I mean, we call it the Trump derangement syndrome, and as you well know, and that's what it is. And so they have that going on. But then they're going to come back after the Second Amendment as well.
Yes. Yeah, that's going to be obviously, I think, the most important thing for me to pay attention to. I think the Green New Deals that will cost more than we have spent as a government since the inception of our government. Those fantasy reforms will not get any traction. They will die in the Senate, fortunately. But what I think is real is the discussion around the regulation of firearms, red flag laws, and other initiatives to prevent mass shootings. I think the first set of questions one has to ask is, will these initiatives in fact prevent mass shootings? And if put in place, will they infringe on the fundamental rights and freedoms of law-abiding citizens? And I go into this very, very sensitive to anything that would do the latter without period, and then any of these initiatives that have been tried in the past, for example, banning assault weapons, 1994 to 2004, the government, not the NRA or Fox News, said from their report that there was no discernible impact on mass shootings, no increase, no scope and scale of injury increase. So, and then you've got places like Washington, D.C., Wade, where I have to keep a gun in a safe with the magazine out, no bullet in the chamber, a lock on the gun. I mean, if somebody broke in my house and wanted to kill me and my family, I'm not going to be able to defend myself. And this is after the Supreme Court overruled the past decades-long gun control laws that were unconstitutional. Well, guess what? In the 70s, when they were at the height of their gun control in Washington, D.C., they were the murder capital of the world. They were the murder capital of the United States, rather.
Yeah.
So I'm just so skeptical about these things. They may sound reasonable, okay? Dan Patrick's come out to say we should have universal background checks. I mean, that sounds reasonable, except when you start thinking about how it plays out in practice and the bureaucracy and the implementation and enforcement, the fair implementation and enforcement. H.R. 8, which is the Democrats' bill that passed the House, purely partisan. I don't think they got a single Republican vote, not even moderate Republicans voted for it, would criminalize law-abiding citizens who transfer a weapon to their child, to their relative, to a friend, a neighbor in need, who may be in the middle of a situation where they feel like their life is threatened. I could go on and on. What's the cost of that? That someone who does that, who gives a gun to their nephew for Christmas, can spend a year in jail and be fined $100,000. So it may sound reasonable. The question is, are the bad guys going to get the guns to do what they want to do? 80% of all crimes committed with a gun were committed by a perpetrator who acquired the gun illegally. And the background check didn't do a thing in Dayton, didn't do a thing to prevent El Paso, and it wouldn't have done a thing to prevent the guy in Midland, unfortunately, Midland, Odessa, because these guys are going to get them. Look, we 98% of the mass shootings happen in a gun-free zone. These guys don't abide by the law. They've decided they want to kill people, and I
look at it. Yeah, and look, on the universal background check deal, this is really what Democrats are saying about that. It sounds reasonable. You continue to hear them flailing around about the polling, saying, oh, well, this is something 90% of all Americans want. But again, like with all polls, depending on how you frame the question, we know for a fact that universal health or universal background checks across the board, close the gun show loophole, all these buzzwords you hear floating around. This is nothing more than an encroachment into national registry. And then you run into the problem where if I want to transfer a firearm, let's say to Mike Ivey, and I go to my good friend Steve Burns, who will do the right thing, but you may have some FFL dealers out there that may not do the right thing. They may start saying, okay, well, you want to transfer that firearm to Mike Ivey over here. Simple background checks doesn't sound too bad, but we're going to charge you $100 for that. And so then you start seeing where I believe if it were to actually become a national law, that with every law, there's unscrupulous people will try to make money off of it. And so this is something, again, that goes right back to hurting low-income people who the Democrats always say they love and support and hold near and dear to their hearts. But everything that they do is against the poor and middle class in this country. It's only for them. It's only the elites. And that's really what this is all about. Sure, I could transfer the firearm to Mike Ivey, pay $100 out of pocket to do so. Not going to harm me all that much. But if you're out there living paycheck to paycheck and really want to have your God-given right to self-preservation, and you got to pony up $100 to some gun dealer out there to transfer a firearm to protect you and your family, that's just atrocious, Congressman.
Yes. No, look, these 8 out of 10 folks that are living, these are middle, lower, and working class. 8 out of 10 people in this country, if they had an emergency that would cost over $500, would be in a real pinch. This is a survey that I never forgot. There are many of them like this that tell you how little cash on hand people have. And, wages are going up. The economy's looking better, but you're right. Just when we get some traction, and we're seeing historic lows on unemployment, historic high job participation, over 5 million jobs created since Trump took office, and you want to put carbon taxes and you want to regulate fracking, all that's going to come back to hit the working man and the working families at the pump, in their heating and air conditioning, electric bills. It's gonna hit the consumer and the working person's going to be hit the hardest. So it's a similar dynamic that you just described when we just start this onslaught of regulation, which we're trying to get out from under with respect to what happened in the Obama era that caused a lot of damage. But in this case, it's worse, and it's more it's more important that we get this right, because it's one thing to regulate carbon emissions. It's another thing to regulate a fundamental constitutionally protected right. And if you don't get it right, you just pass it because it makes you feel better, I think you go on, like you said, a very slippery slope. I mean, we all know more handguns do more or used more in gun crimes or in deaths related to guns. Most of those are suicides and homicides, and the homicides are gang-related inner city. Only 1%, 300 people on average a year, which is 1% of all shootings, and we're putting a massive amount of focus on this. You had 41 shootings over the Labor Day weekend in Chicago. Nobody's talking about that.
Right.
How we prevent that crime anyway.
Yeah, no, it's true. Well, to the text line we go. So Lee asked a question. Okay, well, why not, Congressman, go on the offense, attack the stupidity of the Democrats' position? So that's true. I mean, are Republicans going to come out, to Lee's point, since y'all start the session tonight, as these proposals come up, stop fracking, do the universal background checks, ban high-capacity magazines, assault weapons ban, on and on and on. I mean, will y'all come in lockstep, if you will, Republicans, and hold firm as a caucus, as a group, and say, you know what, that's insane, because here's the reasons why. Make your case to the American people. So that's a question. Real quick, another one. Robin says, well, what y'all guys are talking about, again, punishes good guys again and does not get the illegal guns off the street, to your point about Chicago. But what do you say about that? Will y'all come out and say, no, we're not going to play that. We're not going to do that?
Well, let me say that I've been out there at the local level, town halls, right after the El Paso shooting, and I've been on local media and national media. It was on Fox News the other day talking about this. I don't think many members really want to be out there after shootings. I think I think there is a point. There are good points to saying let's not jump and politicize and get into this in the immediate aftermath, especially when it's in our backyard. But I've been very proactive, and I think that when I say defense, I mean you've got the Pelosi has the gavel, so she can set the agenda, just like they passed H.R. 8. But, yeah, we have to be on message. We have to be unified, and we have to have a plan. I was on a call with a bunch of folks from our conference talking about what's going to happen over the next several weeks. And it was a big conference call, and I spoke up and said, we need a plan, and we need to make sure that whether it's working to find gaps in coordination among law enforcement and intelligence agencies, which I do think is a way to not just reasonably but effectively get at prevention and intervention in these mass shootings. Let's figure out where, because look, if there are things that we can do that are effective and that don't infringe, we should do them. I'm not sitting there saying we shouldn't do anything. I mean, when we had the gavel in the 115th, we did several things, including hardening schools for after the Florida shooting, which I think is appropriate, although I think, states have to work in partnership with us. States have a lot of control over this, and I want to maintain that flexibility for states to make some of these determinations. I certainly don't want a bunch of federal one-size-fits-all policies. I do think there are states, though, that actually have unconstitutional laws in place, especially related to red flag laws. Because in Colorado, you can call from Texas and not even know the person and say, I think this person's crazy, and they'll go in and investigate, confiscate, go to a judge, and, they have to make their case, take the person's guns. But
it's a
in
hassle.
terms of being able to face your accuser and trial by jury and all these things that we hold so sacred as due process rights in the Constitution, those are being trampled, I think, in states around the country today.
Yeah, that's very true. And I hope Texas doesn't go the same route. That was very disappointed in Dan Patrick. And again, he's just reacting. I get that. He's reacting because the media is clamoring for out and out, really, a ban of the Second Amendment. So they're trying to push Republicans into a box, trying to get them to do something, to say something but that's not what this is all about. It really, what Democrats want is a full-on repeal of the Second Amendment. Let's make that very clear. So
that's right. No, they do.
Real quick, though, we just got a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, quick question for me, Congressman. Google's in the crosshairs. Right now, they're looking at them on a monopoly issue, but I'm looking at them kind of at a different way. We just had a couple of years of investigations going into Russian interference into our election. You've got this new guy, I say new, Robert Epstein, Dr. Robert Epstein, testified before the Senate. He's saying basically Google has 90+% of the search criteria, and they're pushing votes based on their political leanings. Have you heard about this guy? Looked into this? Your thoughts on that process?
I haven't, Mike. I mean, I've been following it like others, but it's not something that I've had a deep dive into. I mean, I'm obviously concerned about the monopoly in any industry, but especially where you're talking about the internet and the flow of information, and with the things that we've heard about from Facebook to others, where there's been censorship. I think when you have that monopoly, I would say if you're going to censor, you have to disclose it. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say necessarily regulate it, just disclose it. So you're going to censor. You're going to become just a Democrat forum, but make sure that everybody knows that. And then you have a choice, but you don't really have a choice. That's where it becomes a problem. So the market is usually pretty efficient, as you know, about regulating itself, and the consumer is pretty good about punishing companies when they do bad things, unless you don't have choice. And so I think the antitrust monopoly, prevention and laws and regulations need to be looked at very closely when it comes to these internet companies like Google, Facebook, and others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I don't have the details on this, gentleman.
Well, I haven't started diving deeply either. I just started to catch up on it over the last week, and I thought, gosh, if we were concerned about interference in an election, we ought to, to me, that's one that seems like it has some validity and it's homegrown. So
yeah.
No doubt. I know that, Mike, and you know this too, but just spending as much time as you do with Wade, that he's going to try to get out of this interview without talking about USMCA for fear that we might remind him of the bet he made, the steak dinner that he made with me. So I'm going to say that I think the chances are very positive. The Democrats met last week and did a conference call. I'm hearing that there are greater chances than not to get that across the line. So I'm feeling a lot better. I'm feeling a lot better than I did our last couple of interviews.
Watch out! He'll find the loophole. It'll be a Salisbury steak dinner that you $1.99 from the frozen food department at Walmart.
They closed Luby's down in Lubbock, didn't they? So
Furs is gone too, I think. Oh, it's always good, Congressman. We appreciate that. I hope I'm wrong on that. We do have a steak dinner bet. You're right. We have it on that, but I'd be happy
I think it's helpful.
Oh, it is. But I just don't see these Democrats with all the Trump derangement syndrome and the media complicit. they're really an extension of the DNC, the media in general. But they don't want to give this president or Republicans a win for anything, and I just don't see the MCA. I still feel confident in my steak dinner bet with you, Congressman. And
okay.
but if I should lose, it'll be one of those that I don't mind losing because I know it would be good for the country.
Well, it will be good for the country. You're right, and it'll be good for the Arrington family to have a free meal from one of my constituents. So, listen, I think there's a lot we're going to be talking about in the upcoming weeks, and I look forward to it. I mean, we haven't talked about the Taliban and the negotiations private with the president. I've got real concerns about it, but I think there's certainly a justification on his part. I think I share his sentiments that we need to start figuring out a way to wind these down and have the people of Afghanistan and their government take more control and have more sustainability there. But that is a big point of that's a big topic for discussing. I think in the future I want to talk about that. But there'll be a number of things that'll come up, and in this last leg of the first year of this session before we go headlong into the presidential campaigns. But I do want USMCA because I do think it takes a lot of pressure off and helps the economy. And when I say take pressure off, I think the China negotiations are certainly painful. I wish we didn't have to go through it, but I don't think there's another president that would have the guts to do it. And I don't think that we're going to get another window like this to hit reset with China. And if we don't do it now, we'll rue the day that we didn't bring them to the table, hold them accountable, and work to stop the unfair practices that have cost us dearly. And I mean that. I think they're the biggest existential threat to the United States, and we will certainly regret this if we don't stay there with this president and give him some runway. We need to be smart, and we need to provide I think we need to provide the relief to smooth out the patch for manufacturers and producers using the tariff money in a way that blunts the force of this and the fallout on this, just so the president can get that runway. But I guarantee you the Chinese and Emperor Xi, they're waiting and hoping that this president will not be in the Oval Office so that we can get back to business as usual, let them fleece our country and take us for a ride and play our politicians like fiddles. That's exactly what they've been doing.
Congressman Jody Arrington, appreciate it so much, sir. You have a wonderful rest of the week. We'll look forward to having you back here on the Wade Wilkes Show in pretty shortly, and you feel free to call anytime you want to, sir.
Great to be with you guys. God bless. Go West Texas.
Stick around, Fox News.